We have examined the case where the exchange between Scotland and France was on par. That is, 17% of the Scotch whisky production was exchangeable by the same amount of stuff that 41% of the French wine production would exchange by. This stuff could have been building materials, could have been cars, could have been houses even. Let us say the stuff were sovereigns, golden sovereigns, and 17% of the Scotch whisky production was equal to 10,000 gold sovereigns. That is, 41% of the French wine production was also equal to 10,000 gold sovereigns. But, you might be asking, what if the exchange of actual commodities would be uneven, i.e., the balance of trade would be uneven? Let us examine this scenario. Let us say that the French market for Scotch whisky expands. That is, the absolute demand of French people becomes a wish to purchase more whisky than before. Let us augment this demand by 5,000 gold sovereigns, i.e., the amount of whisky which Scotland exports to France, which was previously 17%, now becomes 23.5%. We are saying that an extra worth of 5,000 sovereigns above the worth of whisky as 10,000 sovereigns already exported becomes produced as a consequence of the increase within the absolute demand of French society for whisky exported from Scotland. So, where previously, say, 100,000 gallons were produced each year, now 108,500 gallons are produced within the next year due to an increased demand, an increased effectual demand of the French society for that whisky. Erstwhile, which means previously, 17,000 gallons would exchange by 10,000 sovereigns. Now, 25,500 gallons, which are exported, will exchange by 15,000 sovereigns. The demand, however, within Scotland for French wine exported from France, we are saying, does not change. The society within Scotland still only wishes to import 41% of the French wine which is produced within France within both years. So, the balance of exchange in the second year favours Scotland by 5,000 gold sovereigns because, in the second year, 15,000 gold sovereigns arrive in Scotland from France, and 10,000 gold sovereigns arrive within France from Scotland. The difference, of course, is 5,000 sovereigns arriving in Scotland. Note, however, it is a fallacy to say that the revenue of Scotland consists in these gold sovereigns. The revenue consists in the worth of, in the first year, 17% of the Scotch whisky production, and within the second year, 23.5% of the Scotch whisky production. It is the worth of these gallons of whisky which constitutes the revenue, and thus it is the exchangeable worth of the gold sovereigns, that which can be had in exchange for them, not the actual amount of gold sovereigns, which is the revenue as 17% of the Scotch whisky production within the first year, and 23.5% of the production of Scotch whisky within the second year. Recall that revenue consists in material, actual, tangible stuff. Now, it might be thought that, in the second year, 5,000 gold sovereigns are leaving France and entering Scotland. And indeed this is the case, but, and a very conditional and very important but, it is only the case temporarily. This is because, after the second year, there are fewer gold sovereigns within France than previously, so their price rises, that is, the price of gold sovereigns within France rises. Think, If there are a shortage of apples within France, the price of apples rises. Thus, the price of gold sovereigns is no different as a commodity. Misguided people might think that the 5,000 sovereigns discrepancy between the amount entering Scotland from France and the amount entering France from Scotland is profit to Scotland, but this is not at all the case. Within the second year, this extra 5,000 gold sovereigns received by Scotland is part of the revenue received, returning to production and transportation of commodities across a frontier. This revenue, the exchangeable worth of these extra 5,000 gold sovereigns within Scotland, comprises those parts of the revenue which replenish provisions and materials used in producing the Scotch whisky, and also the part as profit of the revenue, which is of the extra 5,000 gold sovereigns received in Scotland within the second year, may comprehend the whole part which constitutes the stock reserved for immediate consumption, or the wealth of Scotland, i.e., the extra 5,000 gold sovereigns which are received within Scotland within the second year form an exchangeable worth as part of 15,000 gold sovereigns for the 23.5% of the augmented Scotch whisky production which is exported to France. And this extra revenue as 5,000 gold sovereigns which buys 8,500 gallons of the Scotch whisky production consists of those parts of this revenue which, in addition to profit, replenish the provisions and materials used in producing the finished goods as barrels of whisky. So, part of the exchangeable worth of these extra 5,000 gold sovereigns received within Scotland may be profit. That is, not all of these 5,000 gold sovereigns are profit. But what happens to this part as profit made within Scotland? The answer is that it is either consumed, saved, or invested. The owner of this profit might wish to buy a yacht, in which case it is consumed, or she might save it in the form of bullion or gold plate, or she might invest it. And here lies the rub. Due to the 5,000 gold sovereign having left France for Scotland, the price of gold within France may become greater than that within Scotland. So the worth of this gold within France might become greater than within Scotland. It makes more sense, therefore, for the owner of the profit within Scotland to invest within an enterprise within France, because by doing so, she will get more bang for her buck. She will be able to acquire more capital than by investing within Scotland. There is a negative feedback mechanism here. It is more lucrative and attractive due to the balance of exchange being against France for investments to be made within France. As these investments subsequently become made, the gold returns to France again. In addition to this mechanism, there is also another mechanism by which the gold leaving France will return to France, and this additional mechanism is as follows. We know by the unequal balance of trade that the price of gold within France rises in comparison to the price of gold within Scotland. Assume that within France, the worth of 600 bushels of corn is the same as the worth of 600 bushels of corn within Scotland. So, within France, 600 bushels of corn will exchange for less gold than it will within Scotland. The gold is more scarce within France. Its worth is higher within France, i.e., its price is higher. This is equivalent to saying, so many sovereigns will buy me more corn, more wheat, more produce, more commodities within France than it will do so within Scotland. So it would be more lucrative for the merchant to buy productions within France than it would to buy such within Scotland. Henceforth, material tangible produce leaves France to arrive in Scotland. Thus, more gold now transitions from Scotland to France. This is the reverse direction than what caused the initial increase in the price of gold within France, which was that more gold left France to Scotland than arrived in France from Scotland due to an imbalance within the balance of trade between exportation of whisky from Scotland to France and exportation of wine from France to Scotland. We observe that this mechanism is also a negative feedback mechanism which regulates it such that the money which leaves France is returning back to France, i.e., the gold sovereigns which leave France return back to France. Of course, French money was in livres and sous or ducats or something at the time, but the principle is the same. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about the gold contained within or the price of euros and the price of British pounds. Within Book 4, Chapter 3, Part 2, Adam Smith wrote, each nation has been made to look with an invidious eye upon the prosperity of all the nations with which it trades, and to consider their gain as its own loss. Commerce, which ought naturally to be among nations as among individuals, a bond of union and friendship, has become the most fertile source of discord and animosity. End quote. I quote, the whole capital of England would no more be diminished by this exportation of gold and silver than by the exportation of an equal value of any other goods. On the contrary, it would, in most cases, be augmented. End quote. Thus, the capital of Scotland, in our example, would be augmented by unfettered trade with France, and that of France would be augmented by unfettered trade with England. It is an observation of mine that a monoculture of palm trees does not have the same ecological diversity as the ecological, free market, of a rainforest. So, to infer that the palm tree plantation is unfettered and unchained is a cognitive dissonance. I believe in social safety nets such as a welfare state and public services such as sewage systems, prisons, schools, hospitals, police, teachers, but the revenue to pay for these must be acquired via a method of taxation which is not inflationary. I say this can be done. Adam Smith said, if the tobacco, which in England is worth only £100,000 when sent to France, will purchase wine, which is in England worth £110,000, the exchange will augment the capital of England by £10,000. If £100,000 of English gold in the same manner purchase French wine, which in England is worth £110,000, this exchange will equally augment the capital of England by £10,000. As a merchant who has £110,000 worth of wine in his cellar is a richer man than he who has only £100,000 worth of tobacco in his warehouse, so is he likewise a richer man than he who has only £100,000 worth of gold in his coffers. End quote. I paraphrase. He, the merchant, with £110,000 worth of wine in his cellar, which he has purchased by exchanging it for £100,000 of gold, can put into motion a greater quantity of industry, and give revenue, maintenance, and employment to a greater number of people than either of the other two, where the other two are the merchant with £100,000 worth of tobacco in his warehouse, and the merchant with £100,000 of gold within his coffers. End paraphrase. I quote, "But the capital of the country is equal to the capital of all its different inhabitants, and the quantity of industry which can be annually maintained in it is equal to what all those different capitals can maintain. Both the capital of the country, therefore, and the quantity of industry which can be annually maintained in it must generally be augmented by this exchange." End quote. And what did Adam Smith say pertaining to when the balance of trade would be against England in favour of France? I quote, "The trade, however, would in this case, as in the foregoing, give some revenue to the inhabitants of both countries, but more to those of France than to those of England. It would give some revenue to those of England. The capital which had been employed in producing the English goods that purchased this gold and silver, the capital which had been distributed among and given revenue to certain inhabitants of England, would thereby be replaced and enabled to continue that employment." End quote. I quote, "In every country it always is, and must be, the interest of the great body of the people to buy whatever they want of those who sell it cheapest. This proposition is so very manifest that it seems ridiculous to take any pains to prove it, nor could it ever have been called into question had not the interested sophistry of merchants and manufacturers confounded the common sense of mankind. Their interest is, in this respect, directly opposite to that of the great body of the people." End quote. I quote, "Hence, in Great Britain and most other European countries, the extraordinary duties upon almost all goods imported by alien merchants. Hence, the high duties and prohibitions upon all those foreign manufacturers which can come into competition with our own." End quote. I quote, "The violence and injustice of the rulers of mankind is an ancient evil for which I am afraid the nature of human affairs can scarce admit of a remedy. But the mean rapacity, the monopolizing spirit of merchants and manufacturers, who neither are nor ought to be the rulers of mankind, though it cannot perhaps be corrected, may very easily be prevented from disturbing the tranquillity of anybody but themselves." End quote.